The Walking Dead Rewrite, Season 8, Episode 12, A Well-Deserved Massacre. We open with Dwight, Sherry, and Magna, who are on patrol for Hilltop, a few miles out, as we see Glenn rides up on horseback and asks them, "All clear?" Dwight says, "Yep, still clear," and Dwight asks, "What about the other checkpoints?" And Glenn says, "Go in there now, I'll let you know if it's clear." Dwight says, "Alright," and he rides off, and Sherry says, "How much longer until Eugene gets the cell phones working?" Magna says, "Is that a thing he's working on? Are you joking?" Dwight says, "She's joking, obviously, but honestly I wouldn't put it past him. Eugene always seems to have something cooking up." Sherry says, "Yeah, he's been in there for a while though. Does it really take that long to build whatever he's building? I don't even ask at this point." Dwight says, "Honestly, in his defense, if it's something useful he's working on in there, then I'm good waiting." Sherry then looks out with her binoculars and says, "I think we're good." And Magna then looks out with her sniper rifle and looks through the scope. But she then sees one walker walking through the woods. And she's like, "That's, no big deal." She then sees two zombies. And she's like, okay. And then all of a sudden, as she keeps looking, the whole entire herd is heading towards them from far. Magna looks scared and Dwight says, "What is it?" And Magna looks back at Dwight and Sherry and says, "They're coming." We see water filled with blood, as we see Alpha, who is cleaning herself off after what just happened with Daryl. Negan walks up to her and says, "You missed a spot." Alpha looks at him and wipes the last bit of blood off her face, and Negan says, "God damn, just as hot as ever." Alpha looks at him with this annoyed face, and Negan says, "Well, I heard Big Man was going out to handle some business at Alexandria, and I couldn't help but notice, but seems like you had yourself a little close call yourself out there." Alpha says, "I am strong. I came back. And so will Beta. He always does." And Negan says, "Well, maybe that's true, but you and I both know that this is war now, and if we're really gonna come out of this with our dicks still attached, I was hoping you'd hear me out on a suggestion." Alpha gives him this look, and Negan says, "I get why you want to take out Alexandria and Rick and the Piss Patrol. Some people, they just have it coming. But you know what might feel goddamn fantastic? Getting those assholes to surrender. Bend the knee. Alpha, we can get them to join us." And Alpha says, "Explain." But we then see Beta walks up to Alpha, and Alpha puts her hand up towards Beta and says, "We'll talk later." And Beta looks pissed, and Negan just smiles at Beta, and he says, "The Alpha will be with you shortly, big tits." And Beta looks pissed off and walks off, and Alpha says, "Tell me." And we then see a montage of all the Whispers collecting sap from the trees, and Beta included, and we see Alpha is now handing Negan a branch, and not Beta. And Negan says, "Does this mean I've graduated to the new level of kinky whisperer shit?" And just like in the regular TV show, they would start hitting each other on the arm with this branch. And yes, she would make Negan do it too. I love this scene in the TV show and I would definitely keep that. However, there's a lot here that I feel like needed to be extended, and that's why we did so. Now, we then would cut back to Hilltop as we see Eugene on the radio talking to Stephanie. And we would see him and he would say, "I'm in Virginia." He would open up about where he's at, just like in the TV show, and just like in the show as well too. I really wouldn't change this communication. She would say, like, "I'm not comfortable sharing where I'm at. Like, my people are very cautious, Eugene." And, Eugene understands that, he gets it, but he wants to meet her at some point. And she says, "I would really like to meet you too. So, okay, I'll talk to my people." And he says, "I'll do the same." She's like, "No, don't talk to your people yet. Wait for mine to respond. Then you can talk to your people." Which definitely at the time of only hearing this woman's voice is very sketchy at the moment. Now we would then cut back to Daryl, and we see him walking out of the medical trailer at Hilltop. And you would see him walk out, and Dog would walk up to him and he would say, "Hey boy, I missed you." And we would see Carol that would walk up to Daryl, and Daryl would say, Hey, and Carol would say, I see you're awake. And Daryl says, yeah, feeling a lot better. Doc said I should be okay. And Carol says, you good? And Daryl says, yeah, I just hate being in one of those. I feel cooped up in one of those tiny trailers. And Carol says, well, I'm glad to see you back up on your feet. And Daryl says, how's it been? Patrols? Any sign from Alpha? And Carol says no. And Carol kind of looks sad about this. And Daryl looks at her and says, you want to fight, don't you? You want to find Alpha. And Carol says, I do, but I'm not going to let my emotions get in the way of what I'm doing. And I would definitely have Carol say this just because I feel like one of the biggest annoyances about the Whisper War in the TV show was Carol and the way she's acting. So this is kind of to confirm for you guys in the rewrites that Carol is not going to act very rash. She's not going to act very, kind of out there. Yes, she did lose, obviously Ezekiel and Henry. That is obviously a big loss for her. But it's not going to ruin the character and make her, in my opinion, almost unbearable in the main Walking Dead TV show. So I would definitely have her say that here. And as Daryl and Carol are kind of talking, we would then see Dwight, Magna, Sherry, and the rest of the patrols that would come back to Hilltop and report. As you see Rick and Michonne who walk out and, obviously check in with the rest of the patrols, you would have Dwight that would approach Rick and tell him what they saw. And they would tell them that the herd is coming. And they say, well, maybe we can go out there and fight. And everybody's kind of saying, oh, well, maybe we can do this, maybe we can do that. And obviously then Lydia would say to everybody, no, we clearly can't go out there because my mother's coming. And everybody would be on edge. Now we would then see Rick go upstairs and talk to Eugene. He would say, Eugene, are you here? I need to talk to you about something. And, he's like, I thought you should know, the Alpha and the Whispers are coming, right? And Rick would kind of go up there and, he would hear this voice that would come in over the walkie. And in the original series, it was Rosita that heard the voice. And in this version, I definitely want to keep it like the comics. Rick would, kind of respond like, hello? Who the hell is this? And Eugene would, kind of go down there. And instead of Eugene just ripping the, thing from Rosita's hand, I don't think Eugene would be able to do that to Rick. Rick would literally look at him as Eugene rushes down the stairs and he would say, oh, Rick. And then Rick would be like, what the hell is this? And he would hold the radio up in his hand. And Eugene would say, nothing at all. And Rick's like, Eugene? And Eugene says, I've been communicating with someone outside of our orbit. It's someone, I don't know who, but she has a safe place. She must. I mean, she's been communicating with me for over a good few days. And Rick would say, a few days? And you didn't say anything. And Eugene would say, Rick, I'm sorry, but she didn't want me to talk to you. She didn't want any of us to know about our communication. She wanted me to keep it just between us. And Rick would say, Eugene, do you have any idea how risky something like this is? And, Rick would give him the rundown, this is a risky situation. And Eugene would say, I don't think she's dangerous, Rick. I don't think she's, gonna hurt us. And Rick says, I used to think that way too, until I showed up at a place, and then next thing you know, I'm locked up in a train car and they're gonna eat me the day after. You can never be too careful, Eugene. And Rick says, I'm keeping this between you and me. I'm not telling the others yet, we already have enough on our minds for tonight. But after this is over, I want you to come clean. And if this is something, we'll deal with it, but not right now. And Eugene understands. And then Rick says, all right, I got a job for you to do. You up for it? And Eugene would say, anything you want, Rick. We would then see everybody gathered inside of Barrington House. And we would see them talking like, maybe we can just take them back to Alexandria. Maybe there's a way that we can get the kids to safety. And unlike the TV show, I'm going to completely scrap this crummy, really just out of nowhere plot that goes absolutely nowhere, where they try to go to Oceanside and then they can't go and then they go back. Guys, honestly, it's such a waste of time. It's not even funny. They already know they're trapped. They already know the herd's coming. Everybody's already there. So honestly, the panic would already be real at this time. I don't feel the need of having all that crap kind of thrown in here. So really, then they would come to the conclusion no, we can't leave. We're trapped in. Alexandria can't get in. Sanctuary, they can't get in. So what we have is what we have, right? And Dwight would mention, after that battle in Alexandria, we're low on ammo. Dwight would be worried. There's only about, a couple dozen fighters in Sanctuary. We're low on bullets. We don't have all that many, guns to begin with. And they'd be kind of panicked. And I really like the feeling of this scene where they would be like, crap, we're low on ammo. How is this going to work, And they would all kind of start saying, we're going to have to go hand-to-hand combat. We're going to have to, really ride this out. And we're really just going to have to use what we have, because right now, this is all we have. You know, a couple guns, a little bit of ammo left, and the rest is hand-to-hand combat. So that is the panic that we would feel in this scene. And I think it would work very, very well. And it would make you feel like, oh God, like our group is screwed. And that's really the feeling I would like to put in this scene. And I would love it too. And just like in the TV show, Diane would say we're on our own. In this one, I would have Michonne say, guys, look, we're on our own. Like that's all there is to it. We only have what we have right now, and that's all there is to it. So I would love it. And now it's not about how do we get out? No, how do we defend them from in here? And that would be the point of this group meeting. So now it's not about how do we get out, it's how do we protect the Hilltop. Now, in the original TV show, obviously, we had Lydia that had a heart-to-heart talk scene with Carol, and in this version, I would have Lydia sitting there, but I would have Carl approach her in this version, and he would sit next to her, and he would ask her, are you okay? And Lydia would say, yeah, I kind of have to be, right? And Carl says, well, you don't have to be. You can choose to, or it'll just come on its own, but eventually it'll all be okay, he says. And then she's like, what's gonna happen tonight? I feel like it's all my fault. I feel like if maybe I would have just stayed with my mother. And Carl would say, no, you can't beat yourself up about that. Alpha was going to do this one way or another. Your mother, she's going to pay, I promise. And Carl would take out his gun and he would show it to her. And Lydia would look at it. And Carl would say, my father gave it to me when I was younger. Well, actually, I stole it from Daryl's motorcycle, but keep that to yourself. And Lydia would start to kind of laugh. And Carl would say, I had to shoot my own mom with this gun. And I get the feeling that tonight, you may have to do the same thing. The weight of that. What it does to you, I'm not gonna lie to you, it hurts a lot. But you can't change the past. But you can change how you adapt now. You can change how you adapt today. So I'm giving this to you. And he would give Lydia the gun, and she would slowly take it from his hand. And Carl would say, tonight, what's gonna happen, nobody can predict. But one thing I know for sure, we're gonna get out of this alive. And Lydia would hug Carl, and they would have a heart-to-heart, except in this version, it was Carl, and now Lydia is taking the gun. We would then see Eugene setting up the cable that we see in the main TV show. And in the TV show, we had this really dumb kiss scene with Rosita and Eugene. I hated it so much. So in this version, I would have Eugene that would be setting it up, and you would have Dwight and Sherry that are drinking beers. They're kind of, prepping themselves, getting a little bit of booze in them before this whole, war kind of begins, just like Rosita did, but it's Dwight and Sherry. And Dwight would kind of approach Eugene. He would say, Eugene, at it again. And Eugene would kind of laugh and say, what do you want, Dwight? And Dwight would say, I'm just making sure you're ready for tonight. I mean, we're all battle prepped, but you think you got this? And Eugene would say, well, we'll only know for sure tonight. And Dwight would say, well, I'm impressed. I think this will work. And Eugene says, thanks, Dwight. And we then see Dwight hands Eugene a beer, and Eugene takes it and says, thanks. And Dwight says, I always think about what we've done and what we're gonna do, and I just don't know. I don't know where this night goes. I really don't. And Eugene says, well, hopefully we survive, and hopefully this will all blow over in a good few days at most. And Dwight says, I hope you're right, man. I really do. And he would pat him on the shoulder, and then we would see Dwight and Sherry walk off, and we would see, as Eugene looks back at them, Dwight puts his hand over Sherry's shoulder, and then Eugene starts to realize he wants that. He wants to have something like that. He wants to have a relationship like that. And that would then trigger him to continue to talk to Stephanie. But instead of having this dumb kiss scene that makes absolutely no sense and goes nowhere plot-wise, I would replace it with this. We would then see Glenn, and we see him with the patrols as he's looking out with his binoculars and he's walking everybody. And then he sees rats that are coming out from the forest, and he would look back and he would say, the herd is coming, and everybody would run. We then see Eugene back up on the top of the house, and he would start singing the song in the TV show. And obviously this would be kind of a montage, and I actually really like this. Like, you know, Eugene's kind of singing, trying to get, you know, Stephanie to respond again, and he'd be singing the song, and you'd see everybody kind of getting prepared. And throughout this montage, you'd see everybody kind of getting set up. And I think this would be really cool. You know, you see like Gamma there with them. You see Glenn, you know, obviously he's getting battle ready. You see Jesus, he'd be like putting on his armor, and everybody would all be getting, you know, prepared. And I think it would be a great scene. And then obviously Stephanie's voice comes in over the, you know, the radio, and she would set a date for them to meet at one place in 1 week. Can you be there? And he promises her he will. And that's the end of it. And we then hear a knock at the door, and Eugene says, "I'm coming." And Eugene kind of just smiles and says, "I have a date." And he walks down and gets ready for war. And we would then see Rick walk downstairs, where then we would see Daryl, who's still kind of in rough shape, but he would say, like, you know, "Rick, are you good?" And Rick would say, kind of have to be, right? Which would also be similar to the conversation that Carl had with Lydia, so it almost kind of ties in a little bit with the dialogue. And we would get to see Daryl and Rick make this deal. Like, if I don't come back, Daryl, you get the kids out. And, you know, Daryl would say, you know, same thing. You know, if you don't come back, whatever, I get the kids out. So it would be the same thing with Daryl and Ezekiel, but this time it's with our two favorite brother duo, Rick and Daryl, that would make this deal. And they would shake hands about it and all that kind of stuff. Now, we would then see Rick. Obviously, in the original version, it was Daryl that talked to Judith, but in this version, Rick goes to talk to Judith, and obviously he would say, like, if Daryl comes looking for you, you go with him, whether you know where I am or not, right? And in this version, she would give Rick his murder coat. And yes, I would have Rick put on his murder coat for this battle. She would give him the coat, and Rick would put it on, and she would say, it fits kind of small on you. And she would kind of tease him about it, and Rick would kind of laugh at this. And then Rick says, "Look, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know you're strong, and I know you're going to make it." And he would, you know, obviously hug her, and obviously that would be the last time he sees Judith now before they go out to battle. And we would then see Rick, who's watching over the graves at Hilltop, just like Daryl was, and the person that walks behind him is Michonne, and she would say, "Are you ready?" And Rick would say, "Yeah." And Rick would then walk over. As you see everybody lining up outside, it would be Rick and Rick only. He would grab his red machete from the pile of weapons, and he would walk outside of the walls of Hilltop, and he walks out into the battlefield as they get ready for the herd to show up. Now, one of the things with this battle that I definitely would have happen is you would have in this version Connie, who obviously is deaf, but she can sense when she puts her hands obviously in the ground that, you know, the herd is coming, right? And they would all get prepared. You'd have Rick and the rest of our crew, Morgan and everybody else that's standing there in a crowd, and they're obviously now having to use their hand-to-hand combat type weapons because they are so low on ammo after what's happened. Now, obviously, this is when you'd see the herd approach, just like in the show. And I would have it go basically exactly the same. You know, I think the show really does a good job at realism when it comes to this scene, which is, you know, the cable would not work. It would work for a little bit, but after a while, yeah, you know, they would break through and it wouldn't go well. So then you would see them splitting ranks, right? You would get to see some that charge on one side and one that charge on another side. And they have to go hand in hand and kill zombie after zombie after zombie. And the visuals here is something incredible, and I would love it. You would have Rick, he would, you know, take out his machete and start slashing the zombies. You would have Daryl, I would have him using the Morning Star just like in the TV show. You would have some of our characters with arrows. You'd have, like, you know, some of our characters all just fighting with like bone arrows and stuff like that, and some of these like hammers and all these cool weapons. You'd see Gamma, you'd see Lydia, you'd see Carl. I mean, they're all just fighting to the death, trying to kill as many as they possibly can. And I love how the TV show did like this whole like slow-mo fighting thing. I think they did an incredible job with that, and I'd be an idiot to touch that, to be honest. That is absolutely perfect, and I love how they do it. And, you know, all the visuals, the zombies, all that stuff, I think it goes very, very well together. Now, obviously, you would have Beta and the rest of them that are setting up this sap. And this is obviously what we saw earlier in the episode, and now we're seeing it come full circle at the end of the episode, where we see, of course, Beta makes them all shoot this sap into the crowd, and, you know, they'd be like, "Is that gasoline?" Whatever, and they would all be kind of worrying about it. And, Rick would kind of sense that something's off here. This is when you would see, like, the panic starts to rise. And Rick would kind of start to sense, like, something's wrong here. Something's not going well. And obviously, they would kind of start to, fall back. But they're still trying to kill as many of the dead as they possibly can. They're trying to wipe out this herd. But the sap is going all over them and stuff like that. And you would get to see it's just a big mess after a while, right? And then you would start to see, obviously one of their soldiers would, light on fire. And that's when they'd realize, like, oh crap, this isn't good. So as they try to fall back and as the dead start coming towards them, you would then have Alpha that would be lighting some of the arrows. And, Negan would say, like, I thought you wanted them to join us. And she says, they will, as part of my horde. And Negan would say, holy shit, you are badass. And she would kind of smile at this. And Negan and the rest of them would get their arrows. And yes, they would, just like the comics and just like in the show, again, no need to change this, they would fire right into Hilltop and light the place up. And as Rick and the others decide to retreat, because obviously some of their men are catching on fire, they kind of have to get the hell out of there, right? They would try to run back in, and then you would see Hilltop on fire, in flames, and you would see everybody standing there as Rick looks pissed off, and you see the Hilltop is lit on fire. So as they try to make their way through and as they're fighting through Hilltop, you would have Daryl with the Morning Star, Morgan with his axe as they're trying to contain the zombie herd and try to keep them from getting inside. But as we see the Hilltop burning, Eugene sees the Barrington house is on fire and he runs. As Rosita runs after him, Eugene is now going after it, and it's just like in the TV show. And we then see Rick with his machete. As a Whisper takes a swipe at him through the herd, Rick would stab this Whisper in the belly and the Whisper would go down. And as this Whisper is bleeding out, he begs for forgiveness. And Rick would say, I don't take promises anymore. And he would slash the guy in the head with his red machete, which is a direct callback to The Walking Dead Season 5. And especially since he has his murder coat on, I think that would be a great kill for Rick to have. Now, as they're fighting through, you would have Daryl that would approach Judith and he would say, let's get you somewhere safe. Now, we'd also see Morgan as two Whispers come up to him, and Morgan kicks both of them and puts them on their ass. And he kills one and stabs one of the Whispers in the head, and then there's one more Whisper that gets up and tries to fight him. Morgan then knocks this Whisper on the ground, and the guy says, you're gonna be sorry. And Morgan looks at this Whisper and says, I'll never be sorry. And he kills him and stabs him in the head with his axe. We then see Lydia, who is watching Hilltop burn down, as you see a Whisper approach her, and Lydia pulls out the gun that Carl gave her. And the Whisper puts their hands up and says, I'm taking you back to Alpha. Don't make it hard for me, Lydia. And Lydia would point the gun towards this Whisper, just like in the comics. And the Whisper would say, this place is gone, Lydia. The fantasy that your mother talked of, it's over. You're coming with me now. And Lydia would point the gun towards this Whisper and she would say, this is my home. You shouldn't have come here. And you are all going to die tonight. And she would say, just like the comics, the time of the Whispers is over. And she would shoot the Whisper in the head. As we see Hilltop burn, the battle continues. So that was The Walking Dead, Season 8, Episode 12, A Well-Deserved Massacre. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It is so much fun to be able to do The Walking Dead rewrites with you guys again after a very long and unfortunate hiatus. However, I will say that these next few episodes, while the date is not set in place, they will be coming very soon. So stay tuned for more episodes, and I will say that this episode right here is the beginning of a very big battle. And that is the one detail I will give about the next episode of the rewrites, is that unlike the TV show, which had literally like I think a 5-minute opening scene and then the battle was done, don't worry guys, I'm not going to do you like that. We have a major battle episode coming next episode, as well as what we've already been watching in this episode, but it's about to get really crazy. So stay tuned guys, that is it for this episode of The Walking Dead Rewrites, and stay tuned for the next episode, because coming up next is The Walking Dead Rewrites Season 8, Episode 13, Walk With Us. Thanks for watching.